together with letters and some annexures to it. We beg leave to simply hand this up for your information at this stage, and that we propose that we would like to deal with it in the morning, if that is possible.
I think read, you have time to read, unless you say you have read it.
I have read it, but because the chairperson and Mr. Sundaram have not had time to have a look at it, I was going to propose that maybe we deal with it in the morning, or would you like me to read it into the record?
But what is the affidavit about? Is it an application for anything?
There is no notice of motion, it's just an affidavit, but the letter from the attorneys makes this statement, which I think...
I think reflect on it exactly.
And then let you know in the morning.
Because
thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You can't just send a statement affidavit without indicating what the purpose is.
Yes, that's what is also puzzling us. Thank you.
Yeah, and
thank you.
You need to examine it and we take it from there.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. May we then proceed? Mr. Sundaram, could you just go back?
Maybe I must just check this. Mr. Sundaram is available in South Africa for how long?
He's available tomorrow. He's leaving tomorrow in the evening.
Now, the implicated persons got enough time to apply for leave to cross-examine him, and the time expired and there was no application?
Yes, that is correct. Yes.
Okay.
That is correct.
Well, maybe make sure that when we adjourn, I do get that affidavit informally.
Yes.
And then you can deal with it formally tomorrow morning.
As you please.
So that to the extent that it may contain a version that should be put to Mr. Sundaram.
Yes.
That can be explored.
Yes, we'll do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, all right.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you. We are on page 20. Yes.
Yes.
You wanted to highlight.
Also, so we need to check whether the person who was deposed to that affidavit has indicated that he or she is available to take the witness stand
tomorrow.
Not necessarily tomorrow, if and when required to by the Commission.
Yes.
When they apply for leave to cross-examine,
yes,
they deal with that. Yes. Now, he or she is not applying for leave to cross-examine, but it might be helpful to know that the person is making his or her version on the understanding that if required, they have no problem coming to testify to that version.
We'll do that, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, thank you, Mr. Sundaram. You wanted to highlight something in 5.11 at page 21, I beg your pardon.
Yes, the part of the meeting, President Zuma had given us an example of how the coverage should be. So he was telling us that in a few days from that meeting he would be going to Mpumalanga, and that he would expect that ENCA and the other stations would give him a bad publicity about it. So said that they would go there to the local area and get sound bites from the people about how the policies and the programs of the government were not working, and that's what they would highlight when they do a story on that. So that's when Ajay Gupta suggested that we would send a team with you on that on the flight that you're going to, and we do a positive coverage. To which he said,
was that coverage be that of the New Age, the newspaper?
No, for the television station, which was still being...
had it started?
No, it had not started there, but he wanted to get it into a practice kind of a mode. That was a time when we had teams out and they were going out and filming. But what the president said, that if you come there with me on the flight, it would be a very shallow kind of a report that you put out, and it will seem like propaganda, because you'll go and talk to people and get sound bites of how things are working and all of that. But what he wanted instead was an advanced team of reporters to go before each visit that he made to various provinces, and to do stories about how the programs were working indeed, and then follow it up with a visit, so that overall, it was not just a report on that particular day, but a series of reports that came before his visit, and which, so the view was reinforced when the president came there and he gave a speech and put that out. So to which Ajay Gupta said that yes, we'll send a team with you and we'll send an advanced team as well, because we've got various bureaus across the country and they could be the advanced team that sends us these visuals. So it was planning down to that level that happened during the second meeting in terms of the editorial approach that one was to take.
Yes. Thank you. And do you want to highlight something on that page other than what you've just testified to?
There was a brief that was given to the president about the technology that was available. For instance, the satellite trucks that they had, the out-broadcast vans, and also each of the bureaus had a live device which primarily worked on on bandwidth. So he was told that these devices were available and that the station could go live with any of his events from anywhere in the country. So those were the briefings that were given to him about how he could use the technology that was available with the station for his own publicity and all of that, and which was something that he listened to paid a lot of attention to.
And
where you are dealing with what is in 25.13, is that right? Paragraph 25.13?
Yes. Technology, yes.
No, 11, 12, 13.
He's compressed, I think, 11, 12, and 13.
Yes.
He's summarized basically what
yes.
is in 20, 11, 12, and 13, Mr. Chairman.
I see that in paragraph 25.13, you have, I think, within quotes, among others, this statement that you attribute to Mr. Ajay Gupta at the meeting: we can send reporters with you, and we will also send reporters in advance.
Yes.
The positives of the government will surely be highlighted. And then you say, Ajay answered with folded hands. Could you remember all those details when you wrote the book?
I wrote the book without
any notes that you had made?
No, I wrote this book. So the book was released in 2018, but I wrote this book within months of leaving there. I started as soon as I left. I had was in touch with Bridget, MP from Jacana Media, and I had started writing from my recollection. So I had started writing all of this immediately then and sending the chapters across to my publisher.
Let's say you started writing about what? About a month after you left? About 2 months after you left? About 3 months? How long?
No, immediately. As soon as I reached, I had taken a break. I decided that I won't take up any other assignment till the time I had the book out of my head. So I traveled I started writing in Delhi. Then I thought that I needed seclusion to write. So I traveled to Nepal, to Kathmandu, to Pokhara. Then I came back. There was a conference I had to attend in New Jersey. So
yes, but I'm trying to get the time.
So within days.
That lapsed since you left and you started writing the book.
I think it was a matter of days. As soon as I came back to Delhi, I had immediately started writing the book, and I think even in the interviews that I was giving at that time to the media, I had told them that I'm writing this book and that I would have, it'll be a tell-all book and it'll have all the details that I have.
But of course, the second meeting was during the second meeting that you have testified about took place during your second month in South Africa, which was July.
Yes.
And as I understand your statement, you only left around September, is that right?
Yes.
So between the date of that meeting in July, second meeting, to the time that you left, you had not written any notes that recorded what had happened at the meeting?
I have not recorded any notes, but I did remember because these were very important meetings during my tenure there, the meeting with the president. And I remembered all the details also very vividly, because these were not usual meetings and usual conversations. They were very unusual, and a lot of the things really stuck in my head because...
No, I'm just thinking about remembering that when he made a certain statement, his hands were folded. Were his hands folded throughout the whole meeting?
No, see, whenever he said something like this, where he needed validation, he'd fold his hand and say that, in a sign of sincerity, that he's saying it with all sincerity.
Yes.
But that's something that I remembered because here was somebody who was trying to sell an idea to the president, and he wanted to appear, and he did that, in those meetings. And that's something that I remember because these were characters, and these were, the kind of gestures that they make, which really sticks to one's mind.
Yes.
And when I was writing that book, I just put all of that in together because I remember these things very vividly.
Yes.
I remember them because they were very unusual, because I had never been part of such meetings ever before where such things were discussed. And I do remember the mannerisms, the body language that were there.
In meetings that didn't involve the president, was Mr. Ajay Gupta in the habit of folding his arms like that, maybe, or is it something that you only saw at these meetings with the president?
Only in these meetings with the president, because other meetings, basically it was Atul Gupta who was the hands-on person from the family who was looking at this. Ajay's interest in this would come when we were meeting the president, or he would have an occasional visit with his, like half a dozen bodyguards that he'd come from time to time. But apart from that, he was not directly associated with the day-to-day operations there. It was more Atul Gupta,
Yes.
who was the director, who was, hands-on,
Yes.
almost on a 24/7 basis on this.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then in paragraph 25.15, because you've already dealt with the names that the president had given you of persons that you were supposed to approach, you deal with that in 25.14. Then 25.15.
Yeah, so I thought that this was getting into an internal HR meeting as well, because, and he allocated 2 hours of a time on a Sunday where he was supposed to spend time with his family, with the ANN7 team. Like I've said before, his interest in the meetings was like a full shareholder. He wanted to know the details, he wanted to help out. There were issues that the other directors could not resolve that were being brought to his notice, being the president, for him to resolve. And one of the issues that was brought also was about, and I've written there about how the commercial aspects of all of this really intrigued me at that time. And also the statements that were being made, like how the DA, somebody said we had a very effective PR machinery, and they churn out press releases every day, twisting facts and turning them against the government. So this is the kind of statements that were being made there. And also the fact about who to hire, which was something which was an internal decision, was also taken to the president. So that was something that was also discussed there during that time.
And then you seem to have posed a question with Nazim and what he told you.
Yes, because I had asked him, because till that time it was not very clear to me on why we were giving these presentations to President Zuma. I was just told and we were doing it. So we had a very hectic schedule, it was almost working from morning till late in the night in the process of setting up the station. All of us were actually, even the young reporters, young team that had come in, they were putting in 12, 13, 14 hours someday. They'd come in very early and go back in a drop-in that they got from the office, which was well after 10 o'clock in the night. So I thought it was a little funny that we're spending so much time there, hours giving a briefing to the head of state, and why we were doing that. So he told me that, oh, don't you know already that his son is a shareholder in this? And that was when I got to know about it, about his direct involvement in the project. And also about the potential conflict of interest. I was also told about around that time that why the president was involved in this project was because he would then influence commercial decisions as well in terms of the advertising that they would get from the various government agencies and ministries. And since his son was a shareholder in it, he would get a portion of that. So this is something that was acknowledged very openly by the team there, including Nazim, and it was something that was very well known to the staff there, to the senior management, that was the arrangement. We had the president who would help get the government advertising and it influence in other ways using his high office, and whatever commercial benefits that came out of it, a portion of that would go back to his son, and which I thought was a clear conflict of interest, which everybody seemed to be very happy about at that point. So the whole idea was that Mr. Lakshmi Goyal, who was in the joint venture, would bring in since he came from a family of broadcasters, he would make the investments in the technology, the actual real estate, the office, and the influence would be the Gupta family. And Duduzani was there because then he would use his father's office to get commercial benefits for the television station, which would then be shared by all the three partners. And Mr. Duduzani would get to the extent of ownership that he had in the station, a share of the profits.
And all of that is not something that was discussed at any of the meetings, is what you heard. Outside the meetings where the president was present, because my understanding is that you were not part of the meetings that were dealing with business.
No, I was not. I was not part of that. That was, whoever, whether it was Arun Agarwal or me, we were asked to move out, and only then those things took place. But how we found out about that was whenever there was what was known as an executive committee meeting, which was all the executives meeting in the morning. To discuss what are the challenges, what are the issues, what are the achievements. Some of those issues which were discussed in the second half were brought in there. That's how I knew about the Independent Election Commission, how the New Age had to speak with the president to get a share of the millions of dollars that they had, the millions of rands that they had in advertising, or the kind of influence, like for instance, in that executive committee meeting, there'll be somebody from the marketing team who'd come and say, well, we want such and such minister, and we also want his ministry to pay for the venue and the breakfast that's provided there. But they seem a little reluctant, so probably we should take it up in the next meeting and with President Zuma, and he would use his influence to get that minister to come for this. And any of the other challenges that they had would be discussed there, and that's how I came to know about what was happening in the second half of the meetings.
Okay. Thank you. And then, so is there anything else in 25.18 that you want to highlight before we move on to the third meeting?
Yeah, so this is how it was, but they had a similar model which was working for the New Age, and that's the model that they want to replicate here. The difference being that they would have Lakshmi Goyal here who would bring in the investments that would go into setting up the infrastructure. And this was pretty much the routing that was there. The utility of each of the partners was Lakshmi Goyal would bring in the money that would make the infrastructure. The Gupta brothers would have the real estate, and they will provide the infrastructure in terms of the situation in South Africa. And President Zuma through Duduzani would ensure that there was a healthy flow of commercials that came in from the government side, and each of them got a share of that money through their ownership as dividends as it come.
Okay, thank you. And then could you then tell the chairperson about the third meeting that you say took place, and when did it take place and where?
This was in the first week of August 2013. I do not remember the exact date, but unlike the other meetings, this took place in the evening. I remember that...
I'm sorry. Ms. Norman,
yes.
It will be important to for the Commission to look at government advertisements that went into both the New Age and ANN7 over a certain period of time, and to see how it grew,
yes,
if it did grow. I know that there was evidence given, I think last year or even
yes,
early this year, in relation to GCIS.
That's correct.
but it's important to have a clear idea of all government departments and parastatals, to what extent there may have been government advertisements that went there, and to what extent, if any, it might have been different from government advertisements that went to any other TV station or newspapers, and compare. I know that when I had evidence in relation to GCIS, I was shown graphs.
That's correct.
As to how it grew from a certain level to a certain level in regard to certain departments, including certain premier's offices and so on. I still have a recollection of that. But it would be important to have a look at that with reference to the dates of the meetings that the witness is talking about.
Yes.
What was the position before? What was the position after? Does it appear like there was a change, an increase or not, as a matter of fact?
Yes, thank you.
And then what one can make of that is another matter.
Yes, there is a bit that we've done with the one witness that we intend to call, where she has only concentrated on the SABC and all the other TV stations. And but it's limited. But I hear you, Chair, we could perhaps just expand on that before we call that witness. Yes. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Sundaram, you said you can't recall the date. It was in 2013. And in relation to the launch of the AN7, when exactly do you think it took place? Was it a day before the launch, or was it?
No, this was about a few weeks before the launch. So because the launch was in a few weeks before launch, because I think this is in August sometime. I would not recall the exact date, but the last meeting, which is the fourth meeting, was one day before the launch. That's when the President came to the Midrand office of ANN7.
Yes.
But this happened at the residence, the same place in Pretoria, at his residence. We first went to the room on the right.
This is now the third meeting.
The third meeting, yes.
Yes.
So
I think start from how it came about that you were told about the meeting and so on.
Yeah, I was told in the morning, while I was busy with the production of the dry run bulletins that we were making, I was told that we have to go in the evening to meet the President, and that we have to take samples of the best bulletins that we produced. So I was not proud of the bulletins we were making at that time, because half the equipment had not come, the training was not complete, and this was just something that we were doing for internal consumption. So I was not very happy with showing that as a proof of what the quality of the station would be at that time. But I was told that, oh, you don't worry about that, the President wouldn't know about quality and production and all of that. You bring whatever is there and we'll show it to him. Because I think there was a thought that, you can show him a lot of presentations on paper, but if he actually sees a bulletin, if he actually sees a graphic, that will convey much more to his mind than just seeing empty presentations. So they were very eager to show what was being produced. And this was also the first meeting in which Duduzani was present. So I remember we were ushered into the meeting room on the right, where Duduzani had come in, and he was told by the Gupta brothers that, we have a surprise for you today, and we have a bulletin which we've produced and all of that. And in preparation for the meeting, Ashu Chawla was asked to arrange for a player. We had recorded the bulletin on a chip, and that chip was to be played before the President on a player. And also there was a broadcast monitor that was brought in for this particular meeting. And
before you proceed, I'm sorry. The first two meetings, as I understand your evidence, were at the President's official residence in Pretoria.
Yes.
Was the third meeting at the same venue?
Yeah, the same venue. It was the same
room?
There were two rooms here. We initially started at the room to the right, but then when we told Duduzani that we have these bulletins that we want to show him, so he said, why don't we come to the other room? There's a large TV there, and we can show it to him there.
Yes.
And that was a room which had a lot of seating arrangements. There was a large TV on one side on the wall.
Yes.
And when we were trying to hook up the wires, we realized that the wire that we had got with us, we were short on that, the cable was short. So then we decided to go with the plan A, which was to show him on the small monitor that we'd got with us. So we were told that the president's coming into that room, and we quickly put that together and showed him the bulletins. But this was the first time Duruzani, I had met Duruzani, and he was actually looking at something, and he was excited about the fact that bulletins had been produced, and he was knowing that it had actually got to a stage where we were making all of this.
Did you, before this meeting, with that meeting, had you in the meantime met Mr. Duduzane Zuma, or were you meeting him for the first time?
I was meeting him for the first time. I was actually introduced to him for the first time in the room on the right, because that's when he said, we'll go to the other room, and he took us all to that other room, which was there.
Thank you. In paragraph 26, you mentioned that Mr. Williams was not at that meeting.
He was not at that meeting because he was in Cape Town on that day, and also by that time there were serious differences that Mr. Arun Agarwal had with the Gupta family. This was a bit of a turf war, because we had two joint venture partners who were deeply suspicious of each other, Lakshmi Narayan Goyal and the Gupta family. So the reason why they were upset with Arun Agarwal was because he was brought in as head of business, and he represented Mr. Lakshmi Goyal, but he was not given access to the financials of the company. As a matter of fact, it was the CFO of the Gupta family who was running the whole operations, and every time Mr. Agarwal wanted to meet her, she would deny him an appointment, keep hanging if he wanted some information that was not given to him. And that's when I realized that there was some kind of a tussle going on between the joint venture partners as well, in terms of sharing financial information, in terms of sharing where the money that was invested or brought into the project was being invested and put out. So there was a reluctance on the part of the Guptas to share that with him. And they also would snub Mr. Arun Agarwal at every occasion that they could get, to the extent that they would deny him access. He would come and sit in the office the whole day with no work. He had an accountant who was reporting into him, and that accountant, who was a young boy in his early 20s, was also getting direct instructions from the CFO from the Gupta side, and also from the Gupta family directly. So they were giving him a sense that he was not required anymore in there, and that he's not welcome. And in that meeting, I was told very bluntly, when I asked Nazim whether Mr. Agarwal should be informed about it, he said, no, we don't really need to involve him anymore in the project. So they had decided unilaterally to just get rid of him. And true enough, I think in a few weeks, they created such conditions that he had to go back to India. And because they had clipped his wings and made him ineffective in the operations.
Yes. So then at that third meeting, minus the two, it should have been yourself. Who else was there?
There was Ajay Gupta, Atul Gupta, Nazim Hoa, and me. Yes. And Duruzani, who also followed up, and the president, who came directly to the room on the right of the entrance.
Yes.
No, to the left, actually, the left of the entrance.
Yes. And when you say it was held in the evening, what time more or less was it?
I wouldn't remember correctly, but this was, this would be about 4 or 5, early evening.
Early evening.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And then could you then tell the chairperson what happened, what was discussed at that meeting?
Well, at that meeting, they showed the president the bulletins that had been produced. Like I said, I was not very keen that they show those to the president because those were not produced very well. We did not have a fully operational production control room, and most of these bulletins had been produced on a non-linear editing system, which is basically on a timeline, and it had a lot of rough edges. Also, the anchors there were very raw, and there were a lot of fumbles and hesitations in each of the multiple takes that were there, which were not edited out properly. But they insisted that we show this to him. The president walked into the room, and we had connected that television with a small monitor, and he saw the bulletin. I would have thought that with the head of state and the kind of other appointments that he'd have, he'd just probably see it for 2 minutes and then just move on. But to my surprise, he saw a full 15 minutes of the bulletin that was produced very intently. And that was before one of the Gupta brothers said, okay, we've seen, shall we just forward to the next bulletin? So he said, no, I want to see the whole thing. That's when Duruzani came in and said that, probably daddy wants to see, he's impressed by the anchors and he wants to look at them. That's why he wants to watch it, not because of anything else. And there was laughter in the room at that time. Also, I think Duduzani was the one who introduced to his father the fact that these bulletins were made, and he said, Dad, we've got these bulletins. But till a few minutes before that, he didn't even know that, what the status of the project was or whether the bulletins were being produced. He was just told a few minutes before by the Gupta brothers that he had got bulletins to show his father. So, yes, and the Gupta brothers were smiling indulgently when he was doing all of that, the charade in front of his father.
Now, the first two meetings were on a Sunday. Was this one also on a Sunday?
This was a weekday, to the best of my knowledge.
A weekday, yes, okay.
And also,
in the evening, during the day?
No, this was in the evening.
This was in the evening?
Yes.
During
between 4 and 5, if I remember.
A working day, okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Anything in 28.3 and 4 that you want to highlight?
So this is, I have given details about how when I was in the production control room with the bulletin, that's when I got a call saying that we have a president, an appointment with the president in the evening. He wants a quick review of the project. So this is something that was sought by the president. That was the impression that I was given by Atul Gupta, that the president had sought a review, a meeting, and that he would like to see the bulletins that we produced over the last few days. We have to make him happy, to make sure that we take the bulletins where a majority of the stories show him in good light. I do not want the bulletins to be filled with Malema. Now, this was around the time when Malema had just left the ANC and he had started his own political party, and that was a time also where the brothers wanted us to have bulletins that were full of good images of the president and had very little. But this was a time when we were producing bulletins without any pulls and pressures on the team, and they had made these bulletins based on the news priorities of the day. And it was not something that showed the president in good light or Malema in bad light or whatever. So when we took this, also, the presentation was very raw. It was not very professional, but I think even this they turned to their advantage. When the president was watching it, there was just one clip by that time we had got from the SABC, which was of Julius Malema traveling in a helicopter. So which Ajay Gupta knew nothing about, but he created a story right in front of the president there, because when you were seeing the bulletin, there was a story on Malema where he was in a chopper. So he paused the bulletin and he told the president, look, we are showing Malema as somebody who's he's somebody who's corrupt, who likes to live in luxury, who likes to travel in helicopters. So without saying a word in the voiceover, the people would get to know, because this is the visuals that we're using of him. But the truth is that was the only visual that we had of Julius Malema, and that's what the team had used there. So there was no intention to do that. But he turned it around and he said, like you said last time, that we should use subtleties like this, and that's what we've done. He said that, he made it up and said that to impress the president. Yes. And that's something.
Yes. In 28.4, you mentioned that there were a group of models that were hired and were trained. Were these models trained to read the news? What were they doing?
This is something that we had to contend with, because, many of the professional presenters were reluctant to join ANN 7 at that time because of its association with the Gupta family. Many of the credible journalists wouldn't want to have anything to do with it. And even those, like for instance, Nazim would suggest that he could get a few of the prominent journalists, but the Guptas then would have reservations about hiring them. They'd call them all kinds of obnoxious names, which I can't mention right now, and say that no, we don't want that, because they will be against this or against that. So that put us in a situation where we didn't have presenters. So the only option then was to hire at a higher salary journalists, but I think also they were very suspicious of the journalists. They thought that they would not toe the line that they wanted to. So then that's where Atul Gupta got up one day and suggested that let's hire models. And he asked Aslam that, there's a modeling agency that is something that we've used in the past. Ask them to send a dozen models and we will train them to be presenters. I had raised some objections at that time, not because I did not think those young ladies would be able to do it, but news is something that requires experience, a sense about what is being read. Journalism is not just a pretty face reading the news, but it's much more than that. It requires a deep understanding of the issues. You're supposed to ask questions, especially when it's live television, where you have live sources that are coming out. You have to ask questions, or you end up becoming the laughing stock, if those questions are not sharp enough, or if they're not focused enough. But my objections were overruled like many others before that, and he insisted that these anchors come in, that they be trained by a professional and were being brought in. And to their credit, they worked really hard, they worked long hours, they were not being paid much. I think the only incentive for them was that they would get to feature on the station, and very much, not very much more than that. And they did put on a brave face, because here was a time where the technology was very, very basic. Most of the equipment had not come in, and they were still out there, and they were struggling to put things together. So yes, most of the fumbles and things were getting into the bulletin because the anchors were not fully trained yet, and those were not professional journalists, but they were models who were really struggling and trying hard to fit into the slot that they were given.
Yes. Okay, thank you. And then you then, in that very paragraph 28.6, I beg your pardon, you appear as if this was the end of the meeting, because you left at 7 p.m. Were you leaving the president's official residence, or where were you leaving? At 7 p.m.
Which point is this?
28.6, that the last sentence there.
Okay, no, so we were leaving at 7 p.m. So I would correct myself, so it was not 4 to 5, but we left at 7, so it was more like 7:38 that the meeting started, or 7:30.
Oh, so this is you're going back to the time when you left for the meeting.
Yes.
Right,
So I'll try to correct myself. It was not 4 to 5, but it was in the evening, but later.
All right, okay. All right, thank you. And then you deal with the conversation in the car, I would imagine, at 28.7.
Yeah, because they were very agitated about the fact that the Independent Election Commission had not given the New Age any advertising. They knew that there was a multi-million rand budget that the IEC had, which was not allocated to the New Age, and they said that they wanted to bring it up, and the conversation going to so unlike the last time I was traveling with Ajay and Nazim, and they said that we should bring this up and we should make sure that the IEC gives us our share of the money that they have in this, So there was almost a sense of outrage that both of them were there, and they were obsessed about this topic, and they said that we will go and talk about this, we'll make sure that we get our share in this.
Yes.
So it was almost like, how dare the Independent Election Commission not pay this newspaper, and we'll have to make sure that they do it. We have to make sure that they toe the line, and any government agency that has any amount of allocation for advertising, they very well give us a share. So this was a point that they wanted to prove with the IEC.
Yes, and then...
Well, what you have just said may be quite important for the evidence of another witness who has given evidence before me. As I understand you, and you must just tell me if I understand you correctly, you're saying that, was it Nazim? You're saying he was insisting that you, that is they, must get their share of the advertising revenue that the IEC had. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. And did you use the word obsessed as well? Or did I hear something you didn't say?
Obsessed?
Obsessed, in the context of how they wanted it.
What I meant by that was they were very agitated about it, and they almost felt slighted that how dare this government agency would do it? Because why this stays in my head is that in India, the Election Commission is supposed to be a constitutional body which is independent of the government, and no amount of influence, I mean, the political parties, of course, now we have all kinds of allegations that it's a compromised organization, but to think that the head of state there or the Prime Minister's office in India could influence a decision of the IEC is something that goes against the very character of the Constitution. So I was a little intrigued there, about how the President could actually influence the IEC, because these are two different bodies in any democracy. So, and they were very clear that they would talk to him and that they would get a share, because they were assured later on that the President would look into it and speak with the concerned people.
Yes, no, that's fine. I'm trying to make sure that I understood you correctly. I thought you used the word obsessed, so I'm just checking whether I heard you correctly.
I think I said obsessed, but what I meant was that they were very agitated and they were very clear that they would go out there to this meeting and
that they wanted to get their share of the revenue, advertising revenue.
Yes, and they believed very firmly that if they took it up with the President, they would get what was theirs, and that this was also a point, a case in point, so that if any other agency in the future forgot or deliberately kept the new age out of their advertising campaign, or kept them out of the budget that they had for advertising, this would be a case to point, that say that even the IEC kept us out and we got them in. So you know what, you can deny us, but then finally you'll have to give any.
Yes, well, see, that's interesting, because one would have to look at Mr. Themba Masego's evidence. You might not know Mr. Themba Masego. He was one of the first witnesses who gave evidence before this commission last year. He was Director General of a government department then called GCIS, and he gave evidence here to the effect that Mr. Ajay Gupta approached him, and his evidence was in part more or less to the effect that Mr. Ajay Gupta was aware that GCIS or government had set aside a certain amount of money, I think 600 million. I don't know, 600 million or whatever, had set it aside for advertising. And Mr. Masego told me that in his discussion with Mr. Ajay Gupta seemed to feel very strongly that they should be, that is, I think the Gupta brothers or their business or businesses should get a certain portion of that revenue. And on the evidence, the version that I was told by Mr. Masego was resistant to that attempt, and according to his version, Mr. Ajay Gupta wasn't too happy about that and said certain things. But if you describe the conversation that you had with Mr. Nazim and how he conveyed or expressed how much they wanted, what you call their share of that revenue, it may be that there are some similarities with how Mr. Ajay Gupta, according to Mr. Masego, described how much they wanted a certain share of that revenue. But the Commission will look at that and compare. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In paragraph 28.7, a suggestion is made there that apparently this issue had been raised with the President, and that on that evening we were going to get the results.
Yes, and I think, if I remember correctly, I had a conversation with Ajay Gupta later on, and he said that they had a breakthrough. He did give me some figures which I don't remember right now, but he told me that there was a breakthrough in that meeting, and they had managed to get, I don't know if all of that was from the IEC, but from others. He gave me a figure of some rands, and he said that was how much they had been able to get after post that meeting. So.
And was this part of the discussion also held in your presence?
No, that is a discussion that I had, I think, the next day when he had come to the studio. So I was just having conversation with him, and he said,
yes.
"Oh, so I asked him about the meetings that they had, just out of, the making small talk, and he said, yes, we were very successful, and in that meeting we had taken up a lot of these things, and we've got business worth an X amount, which I don't remember correctly, but it sounded like a fascinating amount, a fantastic amount to me in that time."
Thank you. So now you are moved to a bigger room where there's a bigger monitor.
Yes.
And then what happens in that room?
Ashu Gupta sets the player up, and there's, of course, we couldn't use the big TV set which was there because the cable that we were carrying was not long enough. So this plan A, which is to just connect it to the monitor that we took with us, and the president starts watching the bulletin, and like I said, he watched continuously for about 15 minutes where Mr. Ajay Gupta offered to forward it to the next bulletin. He said, "No, I want to watch the whole thing." And then we had Dudu Zani coming in and making his comment, which made everybody laugh. And then, there were visuals of Milema, which Ajay Gupta pointed out was done on purpose, which he didn't know anything about. But he was just trying to fool the president to thinking that all the inputs that he'd given in the last meeting were being followed already. So that's...
and was that still the third meeting? Was that still the third meeting?
Yeah, that was the third meeting, yes.
Okay,
Yes.
okay.
All right, thank you. And then 28.15, you're simply relating to how these visuals were obtained.
Yes.
That's what you're saying, okay. And then what was the president's response after he had watched then the bulletin, if any?
Well, he seemed to be happy. He thought that we were going in the right direction. Atul Gupta had said, he had told me before when I had expressed my reservations about the fact that, this may not be the best bulletins for us to show. Let's wait for some more time, and, when the bulletins evolve, that's when we should show it to him. But I think the ploy seemed to work because the president was happy with this, and that is the input I remember him giving us, saying that he's happy with what he saw, and this is the right trajectory that we're going in.
You have a quotation in paragraph 28.15. Could you just read that out?
Yeah. 28.15, the editorial team used these visuals because they were the only visuals available in the archives bought from the SABC. He had just made that up to please the president, and from the look of it, it seemed he was happy. President Zuma watched all the bulletins. "You have a good thing on your hands. This is much better than the bulletins on SABC. Those are horrible. I like the way you have used the graphics. It reminds me of the international channels. If this is what you will look like on launch day, you will be a hit," President Zuma said with a smile.
Well, in that paragraph, Mr. Sundaram, from the fourth line, you put what you say President Zuma said in quotes. How is it possible that after a month, after 2 months, you could remember the exact words?
So I wouldn't claim
without
that
having recorded.
So I wouldn't claim that these are the exact words, but I remember the gist of what he said and the emphasis that he had on the fact that you've got a good thing on your hands, and I put that.
So, well, that I would understand, but this is put in quotes. You see, from where it says you have a good thing on your hands, this is much better than the bulletins on the SABC.
So these are things that he said, but
as it is exact words, because it's one thing if he made the following point, that's one thing, and put it in your own words, and maybe your own words is a mix of his words and your words, but you are not putting them in quotes as if it's word for word what he said.
Mm-hmm. So I agree that it may not be word to word for what he said, but then those points that are there is what has been conveyed in this. Like I remember he said that you have a good thing in your hands, it's much better than SABC.
Yes.
Those are things that he had said.
Okay, so you must just have a look at that. Maybe overnight, if there are any statements which you have put on codes,
Yes.
but which you didn't intend to say that's word for word what he said, or
Sure.
whether it's him or anybody.
Sure.
It needs to be
I will
made
do that.
clear. Where you are quoting, you are saying that's what the person said word for word, and I do remember. When you don't remember word for word, but you remember the points, you put that in your own words.
All right.
So do have a look overnight so that you do not necessarily give the impression that you remember word for word what he or anybody else said, if that is not the case.
Sure, I'll do that.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Then in paragraph 28.16.
All right, so this is around the time that the SABC had launched their station, and I think a day or two after that. And so from him, so when they launched their station also, it was not the best foot forward in that sense, They had a few glitches as well. So in that context is why he said this. So I'm just giving a little bit of a context to the statement that he made. The SABC had launched its 24/7 news channel a few days ago on the 1st of August 2013. This was the endorsement the Gupta brothers were looking for. They had softened President Zuma before this meeting on commercials, and they could hardly hide their glee. So you see, the final product will be much better than this, President Zuma asked, looking at me. Yes, it will surely be better, as we will have completed the integration by then, and we will have had much better, more equipment at our disposal, and the bulletins will be slicker. So like I said before, these bulletins were not produced in the PCR. As far as I remember, they were made on a timeline. So, and half the equipment in the studio hadn't even come. They came on the last day. The studio cameras, the robotic cameras, the jib, all of that came much later than this. They almost came 2 days, 3 days, 4 days before the launch. So this, I said in all honesty that, this is a product which I was not very proud of. And I was surprised that he would like a product like this and actually say it's better than, the SABC bulletin, the channel that was launched.
And then the caution that the chairperson has just made, you will do the same with those quotations as well,
Yes.
in those paragraphs?
Yes.
Okay. And then who was saying that you was not very happy with the bulletins? Is that yourself still continuing in the next paragraph?
Yes. So, I told him that, we're not very happy with this, these are just practice runs. So he said, well, I'm happy with even these, you guys keep it up.
Yes.
So then he was asked to come and inaugurate the channel on the 21st. I know you'll decline, but, so this is what one of the Gupta brothers said, that, but you must inaugurate the channel. You will have our editors do an exclusive interview with you at the venue, Atul said with a broad smile and folded hands. That will not, so this is what the president said, that will not send the right message. It will not do your credibility any good. I'm a part of the project. I'm always ready to give you an interview after a few weeks, Zuma replied firmly. So this is something which was there. In that meeting, they requested for an interview with him and for him to come and cut the ribbon on the day of the launch, which he flatly refused. He said that if that were to be done, then everybody would know from day one that, this is a station which I'm linked to in any way, or I came and inaugurated, or they're going to have a soft, they'll soften me. So he didn't want that image to go out. But he did come a day before the launch.
Before that, Mr. Sundaram, some months when you wrote the book, did you remember that Mr. Atul Gupta said this with a broad smile and his hands folded?
I do remember that very distinctly, because there was a lot of drama that was involved in the way the Gupta brothers dealt with the president. So, for instance, they know that, they were asking the president to come and inaugurate a station that was being set up, and they're asking him for an interview. But they would do that.
Yes, no, I understand that. This is months later. And you told me that you didn't record anything.
I did not record, but I have it in my...
I'm just surprised that you could even remember that when Mr. Atul Gupta said this, he said it with a broad smile and with hands folded.
No, but I must submit that, I do remember all of this because it crystal clear, because I started writing the book within days of coming back from South Africa, which is something that I reported to the media here as well and got published. Also, I remember these meetings very, very distinctly, very, very clearly in my mind when I was writing the book. I do remember that when he was asking for that interview, he was doing that with the mannerism that I have described here, that, very sincerely we'll ask you to come and please inaugurate the station and all of that. So I do remember the body language during that meeting, especially, when it comes to these critical points during that meeting, where they asked the president to come and inaugurate the station and also give an exclusive interview to the editors, and he did that with his hands folded and, almost in a way that was pleading him to come. Although he knew that that's something that any politician would jump to get an opportunity. But President Zuma was smart enough to say that, no, if I come there and do that, it will be seen as something which is pro-Zuma or, a channel that's linked to me in any way. I wouldn't want to do it.
Well, in the two sentences later, after you said Mr. Atul Gupta's, you quoted what Mr. Atul Gupta said with a broad smile and his hands folded. 2 or 3 sentences later, you say, the following 3 sentences contain a quotation that you say was Mr. Zuma's reply. And it says, quote, "That will not send the right message. It will not do your credibility any good. I'm part of the project, and I'm always ready to give an interview after a few weeks," close quotes. Zuma replied, "Family." You remembered all that family with a broad smile, with
yes, I did.
Closed hands after months.
You see, because I noted these kind of, the kind of body language very closely, because this is something which, was part of the drama that was there, with the Gupta brothers, because I did not see them use this kind of body language elsewhere. There was a lot of arrogance. There was a lot of, the attitude that they were some kind of feudal lords when it came to the other employees. But when it came to the president, also when it came to these kind of issues, they would be all, folded arms, folded hands and smile and things like that, which was, which I thought was preserved for the president, was reserved for him. We couldn't see that anywhere else. It was a very brash, arrogant, rude face that you saw in the office. So I remember this because this is something that I observed at that time and made mental note of, and which stays with me, when I wrote the book, and even now when I read from all of this, I get a very vivid image of that meeting that took place. As far as the quote from President Zuma is concerned,
hang on one second. Excuse me. We spoke earlier on about quotations. You have got a quotation here of what Mr. Atul Gupta said. You say, actually, paragraph 28.17. It says, "I'm not very happy with these bulletins. They're just practice runs," close quotes. I replied, so I guess that's you.
Yes.
Then, open quotes, "I'm happy with even this. You guys keep this up," close quotes. President Zuma was beaming. You remember all that?
Yes, I did at that time.
And then next sentence, open quotes, "Sir, you must come and press the button to inaugurate the channel on the 21st. I know you have declined before, but you must inaugurate the channel. We will have our editors do an exclusive interview with you at the venue," close quotes. Atul said with a broad smile and his hands folded. And then, of course, open quotes, "That will not send the right message. It will not do you your credibility any good. I'm I'm part of the project, and I'm always ready to give an interview after a few weeks, close quotes. Zuma replied firmly. All these quotations, and there are many others.
Quotations, I admit. Quotations, I admit, is, from my recollection, I've put those recollections to the best of my knowledge, that is it. But as far as the mannerisms are concerned, the broad smile and the... I remember those things and I put it there. No,
but in regard to the one that we started talking about, I got the impression that you were conceding that what was within quotations wasn't what was said word by word, word for word, but you sought to articulate the point that was made.
Yes.
Did I understand you correctly?
Yes.
In regard to that one?
Yes.
The other ones that, the one for Mr. Atul Gupta here, and the one for President Zuma, former President Zuma, that we have just talked about, at paragraph 28.17, are those quotations proper, or even with those you sought to make points and not to say this is what they said word for word?
I would say that this is not what they said word to word, but I do remember the points that they made on this, and this conveys what they had said at that time. But I do agree that this may not be word to word. This is the best of my recollection within a few days of my coming back from South Africa. What I recollected at that time, I've put it in there.
But why would you want to put in quotations when you attribute a statement to somebody if you don't remember it as word for word? I mean, you are an experienced journalist, you are an editor.
Yes.
You know exactly what it means when you put a statement in quotations, in quotation marks.
Yes, I agree, I agree with you there. And I would also say that, I did this because I wanted to, when I was writing a book, it was not like writing a news report. So I wanted to put it in a narrative style that I wanted to put in there. And
but you can't put in a narrative form by attributing to somebody words that person did not utter. Can you?
I agree with that.
So why did you do it? Because you could make the same points without representing that those are the words that were said by that person.
So what I've done there is that, to the best of my recollection, what I could remember, I put it there. But I think in hindsight, I shouldn't have put it in quotations. I should have just narrated it otherwise.
No, but it concerns me because you are a journalist. Journalists write all the time. That's their job. And they know the purpose of quoting.
Yes.
And the rationale for it.
Yes.
And they know that when you can't remember that this is what the person said for word, you don't put it in quotes. You make the point to say this is what the person said, or you say, words to this effect, but you don't quote them. You quote them when you are sure that's what they said. Am I not right?
You're absolutely right.
Why would an experienced journalist like you attribute to people words in quotes that he knows he can't say that's what they said word for word?
I agree with you that, I should not have done that. But while I was writing the book, this was to the best of my knowledge, because I vividly remember each of the conversations that I had.
But Mr.
This
Sundaram,
is not the right way.
No, Mr. Sundaram, you don't quote when you say to the best of my knowledge.
I agree.
When your recollection is to the best of your knowledge, you try and rather put it in in an indirect speech.
Yes.
Or if you do quote and you want the reader to know that you are not certain, then you do say that you are not certain, but that's as your recollection that the person said that. But normally, you only put a statement in quotes and attribute it to somebody if you are sure that that's what the person said, word for word, everything that is within the quotes is what the person said, isn't it?
I agree with you. So here, I mean, the quotations that I've given may not be word to word. I do admit that, but it was, the conversations were there in my head, which I took out and put in quote. In hindsight, I think I should not have put them in quote. That I've used another way of putting the narrative out. But like I said, these are the points that I remember very clearly were being said. And maybe I would say that I should not have put them in quotes. I agree with you there.
And there are quite a number of quotes, isn't it, that are made in your statement?
Yes.
And part of the difficulty with quotes is, at least that's my experience, is that they convey to the reader that you are very clear about what that person said. And the reader might think that you kept a record somewhere. If you were to be challenged to say, where did you get this from? You would produce something in writing or a recording. And there are, of course, statements that just stay in your mind. Mm-hmm. But there seems to be so many that would have stayed in your mind in this statement when you didn't record anything immediately.
No, these things, these things were very alien to the way that I'd worked before. So these things stayed in my mind, and when I came back and I took myself out, I was not on any assignment. I went to Nepal, and that's where I wrote the book in absolute solitude in the Himalayas, in Pokhara, places like that. Kept my, shut my mind out for everything else that was there, left my family, and wrote this book. Each and everything that is written here is to the best of my knowledge, what I remembered. Also, the kind of body language that I'm referring here is something that I remember very, very distinctly, because that was very different from the way that they dealt with other people. Also, when it came to President Zuma, I had just these 4 meetings, and everything that he said there has stayed on with me, because it's not every day that you meet a head of state and you have this thing. I was absolutely focused on each and every word that was being said in that meeting. But like I said before, I think in hindsight I should not have quoted them, because while these are to the best of my knowledge, this is what they had said, but it may not be word to word what they said. But the gist of it is contained in this. I would, of course, like you said, I would work overnight to make these references in my statement tonight and do that.
But also, this is not a case where you had 1 meeting. You had 4.
Yes.
And you don't think you may be mixing up what happened in the first meeting with what happened in the second meeting and third meeting and fourth meeting? Your recollection of what happened in each meeting is quite clear, even though you may
Yes, absolutely, because notes. In a television station, there is a sequential order in which things take place. For instance, the first meeting was about the logo, the second meeting was about the animation of that logo. That comes in a sequential order. The bulletins come later. So I'm absolutely clear that this is what happened in each of the meetings, and because I've set up stations before this, I've set up stations after this as well, and this is the sequential order in which things come in. And I remember them very distinctly, because this is the work that I do, really.
Okay.
And there's absolutely no mixing up as far as the meetings are concerned.
Okay, no, that's fine. Thank you, Ms. Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'm sorry, can we take a 5 minutes adjournment?
As you please, Chair. Thank you.
We'll just take a 5 minutes adjournment.
5 minutes, thank you.
We
Thank
adjourn.
you. Thank you.
You may proceed,
Yes,
Mr. Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. You had alluded to the fact that after this meeting, which is the third meeting, one of the Gupta brothers told you that they had succeeded in bringing in business, and you mentioned a figure in paragraph 28.18. Did they mention who are they going to be doing this or getting this business from? In any?
What page are you on now?
I'm on page 29, Mr. Chairman.
Oh, okay.
Paragraph 28.18. Yes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Oh, sorry, it's page 29 on top. 29 on top, and then paragraph 28.18.
Yes, sure.
Oh, thank you.
So this was Ajay Gupta. I met him in the studio the next day or a few days later, and the conversation was around the meeting that we had, and he said, so that's when he gave me this figure that they had done, that meeting was pretty productive, and at the end of the day, they got that amount of money from the business that came. He didn't tell me where those, what was the source of that money. I would think in light of the conversations that had in the light of the events that some of it could have come from the IEC as well.
How much is it? Could you just mention the figure for record purposes?
Sure, I'll just need to refer this
All right.
and I'll just tell you.
All right.
Could you please tell me about the page number that you'd referred
Okay.
before?
Oh, sorry. Okay, let me just see that you've got the correct bundle first. Exhibit CC1, just double check.
Yes.
Okay. CC1 A and B, is that
Yes.
the one?
Yes.
All right. Okay, if you go under, there would be a flag in between, which is written CC1B.
Yes.
CC1B?
Yes.
Okay, if you turn over, you'll see, look at page 29, 29.
Page 29.
Yeah, on top, on your right-hand corner,
29, yes.
29. You see that? Thank you.
Page
And
29.
I was referring you to paragraph 28.18.
18.
Yes.
I was told the next day by Nazim and Atul that they had secured 20 million rands worth of business the previous evening. By the time I had decided to resign as editor and go back to India after the launch.
Yes.
Yeah, so
So
yes,
you say
that's
you
the
were
figure.
not told how they were going to acquire this 20 million rand,
Yes.
and which department was going to fund,
Yes,
or
yes.
to do business with them,
Yes.
to the tune of 20 million rand.
Yes.
Yes. And then you give the reason why you had to resign, or you felt that you had to resign. And what were those reasons that you give in that paragraph?
Well, I've spoken about the dubious commercial dealings that I saw with my own eyes, which I didn't want to be a part of, but there were a whole lot of other reasons, right from the time, right from the way that there were laws that were being violated, not just the visa laws, but also labor laws, in terms of the way they were treating their employees, the way they had a total disregard for any action that could come their way because they were breaking these laws. All of these things, the total, the editor's position was entirely compromised. The editor just had to take his pay and sit in a chair, and everything else was done by this group. And the fact that this was not a news station, but what they wanted to set up was a propaganda station. Now, those are all some of the reasons that had me made up my mind very quickly, very early in the project, that I did not want to be associated with this in the long term, because whatever reputation I had got for myself working since 94 on various projects and media organizations would just I would just throw it away if I continued any longer in this. But of course, I was very uncomfortable with these kind of dealings that I was also part of. I was going to these meetings, and I knew that at the end of it, they were getting these kind of commercial benefits from it. And this is not what I would call a legitimate a business deal that was being done. I have no issues with a newspaper or a television station making profits. But if they are done in violation of laws, if they're done where there is a conflict of interest, that's a condition where I did not want to have any part of that, is what I'm saying here.
So at this point, that is where what you're dealing with in paragraph 28.18, you had not formally resigned, but you had formulated a view or made a decision that you were going to leave.
Yes.
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 And then before you did that, then you had the fourth meeting.
Yeah, the fourth meeting was a day before the launch, because the President Zuma was under a lot of pressure from the Guptas to give an interview and come and cut the ribbon and all of that, which he firmly refused. But I think what he had agreed to is to come and visit the station and to see, the studios and the PCR and all of that, which he did a day before the launch. Now, this was kept very secretive, because even within the team, there were very few people who knew about the visit. For most of the editorial staff, it came as a surprise, because they were going about their daily editorial functions, and suddenly you have the president walk into the meeting, and it was supposed to be something which they wanted to keep confidential, to the extent that there was a camera team that was recording the president's arrival and departure. That in the last minute was told that you're not supposed to do that. The head of production had a whole camera set up, a chain of cameras set up to record the entire event. They were told that they should not do that. Also, there was instructions given to the staff that they should not be taking any pictures of the president, using their cell phones, etc. So there was an attempt at getting a high-profile public figure to come to a newsroom that was full of journalists, and very foolishly, there was also an attempt to kind of try and hide it and to keep it confidential, which I found funny at that time. You have journalists in the newsroom who will, of course, tell their friends and in other news stations that the president came. So there was no point not recording those events or allowing people to take pictures of the president when he came at that time. So yes, the fourth meeting was a day before the launch. When there were hectic preparations that were happening for launch, when everything I could see was falling apart, because half the equipment hadn't come. They were in various process of coming. The technical team was calling up the vendors to find out where in the world they were. They were trying to track the cameras. And once the equipment came in, we really didn't know what bugs would crop up when we start. The integration wasn't done fully. So while all of this was happening, the president came in and he was given a picture of something which was at the highest level of preparedness and totally ready for a launch the next day.
Yes. So in paragraph 29, you say this was 2 days. Are you making a mistake when you say 1 day? 2 days before the launch, on the 19th of August.
Well, I would go with the written submission.
It would be 2 days?
Yes,
Is that the correct one? Yeah. All right. And then you also extracted extensively from your book, from pages 151 to 153,
Yes.
when you deal with those events.
Yes.
So where you deal in paragraph 30 with the attendees who attended that meeting, the fourth meeting that we're talking about, and where was it exactly? You say it was at the NN7 studios. Whereabout was it held?
Well, this was at the NN7 studios, and the president arrived and he was received outside the building by Ajay Gupta, who was there. There was, I was called in. I was in an editorial meeting. I was asked to come in quickly. It was a cold morning, I remember. And there was Lakshmi Goyal, who had flown down from India, who was part of that team that welcomed him. There was Nazim, and if I remember correctly, Muxim was also there, but I don't know 100%. But Nazim was definitely there, part of the team that received him at the gate. And then he was brought in, and he was given a tour of the entire office. I was asked to explain to him the various the equipment and gear that was in the production control room, explain to him the studios and the various aspects of it. He went to the graphics team, went to the video edit area, all of that, and then he came into a room where the senior team met with him. There was a request again to him for an interview, which he declined again. And then, that there was an exit. I've described the other details.
Sorry, so this wasn't this fourth meeting wasn't a meeting in the normal sense, was it? You were just showing...
Yes.
The president was being shown around the studios and so on.
Yeah, I would call it a meeting also because, there was a holding room where the president had come in and, the senior team was sitting there and they were discussing with him. But it was not like the other meetings in the sense that there was no...
But the purpose was really showing him around.
Yes.
Whatever discussion happened was just normal discussion.
Yes. And there was another request for him to give an interview, which he said that he'd give it later, things like that.
Yeah, okay, all right.
Okay. And in that paragraph, you mentioned in paragraph 30 that Mr. Duduzane Zuma was also present.
Yes, that is correct.
So I just want to you'll tell me whether this is a discrepancy. If you go back to page 24, paragraph 27, where you say this meeting was attended by Mr. Duduzane Zuma, the first and last meeting I saw him attend.
No, so he was there because I would go with what is there in the book, which is to the best of my knowledge. So yes, in the meeting, in the sense that like the chairman said, the three meetings were a proper sit-down meeting where strategies were discussed and all of that. This one was a meeting which was generally to just show him the areas, to the various departments and the various the production control room and the studio and things like that. So yes, Duduzane was part of this because I've made a record of that here.
So what you state in paragraph 27 would still be correct to say that the first and the last meeting I saw him attend.
Yeah, because this was not a meeting in that sense,
Right.
So
you distinguish between the two.
Yes.
All right. Thank you. And then, so you were showing the president around, according to you, and how long did he spend at the studio?
That again, I think I will go with what is written in the book because as far as to the best of my knowledge, he came in, he sat in the holding area for about 10 odd minutes, and then he spent some time in the production control room while the bulletin was being rolled, which was say about 15 minutes. He asked me about the various equipment, the video switching equipment, the audio equipment, and I gave him a description in detail. He stood there watching the bulletin. Then he spent some time in the room where the video editing takes place. He was also taken to the room where the graphic production takes place, and he spent a substantial amount of time there, about 10 minutes each in each of those places. Then he went to the studio where he waited because it was a live studio, so he couldn't cross and go. So he waited for some time there, but he observed all the various elements of the studio. Then at some point he also decided that he would go to the various departments where the staff was seated. So he went to the place where the programming team was seated. He went right across the newsroom, shook hands with a lot of people, asked them their names, engaged in small conversation with some of them. So it was almost like a celebrity visiting the newsroom where people were calling out to him and he was waving back at them and things like that. So in all, I would say he spent about 40, maybe 50 minutes during that visit in the studio.
How much time?
Between 40 and 50 minutes.
40
50
and
minutes.
50?
Yes.
50?
50.
Okay.
So I take it that according to what you state in 30.6, that you are the person who actually, because somebody had said, look, they didn't want this visit to be made public.
Yes.
And you are the person who said to the camera crew, no, don't take any photos of this.
Yes, because I was coordinating the editorial team. So the head of production at that time was Karun Thakur. He came up to me and said that we've got the cameras. What should we be filming this visit? So I asked Nazim, and he asked Mr. Atul Gupta, and Atul Gupta clearly said that he did not want any recording on that. So while the team was ready to record, in the last minute they were told not to do any recording. But and Karun had to then withdraw all the cameramen who had taken vantage positions to make sure that they get a shot of the president moving the various departments.
And you are the one who told Karun not to do it?
Yes.
Yes. I'm just trying to understand, for a journalist, that would have been something that's quite exciting. Somebody says, don't record this, and a journalist would have said, record it. was they say don't make it public, you actually want to make it public because it's quite interesting news, isn't it?
See, because these were not ordinary times and this is not an ordinary newsroom. This was, like I said, almost like a North Korean station that was being set up at that time. So, for me, it was clear that, I either led or I got out of the way. By that time, I decided that, I wouldn't be allowed to lead here. This is a station which is not, I had a title and a position, but I had no leadership role there at all. So, would they want it to be recorded? They said no. I conveyed that because the production team was reporting into me. I told him that these guys don't want you to record it because if I said that you go ahead and record it, the cameraman would have had the brunt of it. The production head would have had got the brunt of it. They would have probably lost their jobs or gotten abused or worse. So I just said if they've taken a decision on not recording it, just don't do it.
Do you know whether immediately after the president had visited the studio, whether that came out in any of the news broadcasters?
Of course it did, because I think it came out in all the papers, some websites as well, because like I said, it was, for want of any other word, stupid on their part to actually believe that they could have a secret visit by a head of state into a newsroom that's full of journalists who've worked in other organizations, who've got friends in other organizations, and keep it all under wraps. I believe at the end of the day, there were questions asked to the President's office, and the spokesperson of the presidential office at that time, Mr. Maharaj, had given a statement saying that, yeah, this is part of the engagement with the media that the President gets into from time to time. He also spoke about how he had visited another newsroom recently, and this was part of the series of that. So they did not deny it, the President's office did not deny it, and many newspapers did carry this at that time. But I would want to say at this time that they were under the mistaken notion that they could have a very secretive meeting of the President where he interacts with the journalists and the staff there and the technical team and goes out, and it would remain under wraps.
Yes. And then thereafter, was there any inquiry as to who would have leaked that information amongst the journalists that were there?
I don't think so, because that was something that was there, and also there were a whole lot of other battles to be fought at that time, because we were, like I said, it was a train wreck waiting to happen. We knew we were on the same track as another train coming in the opposite direction at double the speed, and for us to get into any other investigation at that time would have been suicidal, because anyways, we didn't have half the equipment in place, we didn't have the training that was required. Like I said, the bugs hadn't been fixed, and we were going to launch in 48 hours. So I would look at myself then as the captain of the Titanic at that time while it was sinking, So that was what was on my mind. And even if they did conduct an inquiry or all of that, I'm not aware of that, because yes, I had cut myself out of all of that, and I was just focusing on how to get the first day right, because my immediate focus 48 hours before launch was that we would, despite everything that could go wrong, how could I salvage the first few hours, how could I salvage the first day, which I knew at that time was a losing battle.
Yes. All right. And then you deal in how the president was moving around, and then at the end of the tour, what happened? There's somewhere where you mention where he actually spent a bit of time. Was it in the server room in paragraph 30.10? Yes, and the reasons why he spent a bit of time there.
So this is the movement, that he spent some time in the server room. He was told about, because there's a fairly large server there, which really is the heart of the operations, where all the graphics and everything is integrated. He was explained that he went to the graphics room, the master control room. The master control room is really the last port before the signal goes on air. That's where the advertising and promos are inserted. So he was told about the functionality there. The video edit bay, so that was the tour that was given to him. He was also shown a few promos that were produced by the graphics team. So those were the promos that were there, and he seemed impressed on seeing that. But I thought that he was most interested, there were a few technical glitches that went on air in terms of the on-air graphics system collapsed. The live sources started failing as well. So all of that was also happening while he was there. So he did spend a large part of the time in the production control room, where he wanted to know about the equipment there, especially the audio system, because there were a lot of knobs and switches and lights that were there. He wanted to know what the function of each of those machines were.
Yes. And then you say after he had the tour, then he left.
Yes.
And you are one of the people that saw him off, and who else was in your company?
I think the entire team that received him saw him off as well, because there was a convoy of cars that came in and he sat there and he left from there.
Yes. And this evidence that you've put up in this supplementary affidavit, and as we've indicated to the chairperson, you extracted it, most of it, if not all of it, from your book.
Yes.
Am I correct?
Yes.
And if I may just take you to your book right at the outset, this is something that you state. If you have a note to the reader, or you didn't bring your copy.
No, I haven't.
Yeah, right. Mr. Chairperson, we had made a copy available to you. Might I just
Yes,
thank you.
Want to refer to something in the
page,
book?
yes, to note to the reader. It's unfortunately it's not a page number. It's just after the title of the book and the author, and then there's note to the reader, which will show when was the book published. And could you just refer the witness to my colleague's book, just that part, so that you can read it. Sorry. Yes, could you just read into the record what you stated there?
The events described in this book took place as remembered by Rajesh Sundaram. We've tried to verify whether the meetings and conversations took place as described in the book. Former President Jacob Zuma was approached for corroboration, as were brothers Atul and Ajay Gupta. To date, we have received no response from them, and they may well have a different interpretation of events. And by pointing this out, we leave it to you, dear reader, to make up your mind.
Yes. And every time when you were quoting from, maybe before we leave the book, the date of publication of the book, could you just read that into the record before I leave that?
I'm sorry, Ms. Norman. Is that a usual note to the reader?
See the book.
To a reader in books.
Because there is a history to this. I'll tell you why. Because, like I said, I wrote this book in 2014, but there were circumstances then where, much of the corroboration that was needed for this were people who were still working with ANN7 at that time. And there was also, the publisher thought that we had to be 100% sure that the legal part of this, that we were on the clean. And there were issues there, and we were advised by the lawyers that, we can't go ahead at this point. But what happened by 2018 was that we had the Gupta leaks that had become public. We had a whole lot of people who were working with me at that time had left ANN7. They had taken up positions with Al Jazeera. Some of them had gone to Turkey to work with TRT. Some of them had come back to India and they were working with the top stations there. And then corroboration was established at that time. It was also the time when President Zuma was no longer in office. The Gupta brothers had left the country. The Hawks had gone to their Saxon World home and they found that they were not there. And at that time, the publisher sent them a notice saying that we're going to publish this book within 15 days, and this is the full manuscript of the book, and could you come back if there is any objection? It's been about a year and a half right now, approximately. We have not heard back from them. So that's why, while the book was written, I started writing the book in 2013, gave the full manuscript about 2014. It was published in March 2018, without any changes to the core of the book in 2018, and after the due process was followed.
You said you started writing the book about days after you had left South Africa, is that right?
Yes.
So you left South Africa sometime in September 2018.
2nd of September. Yes.
So the book, you started writing the book within days thereafter.
Yes.
And when did you finish writing the book?
I can check that and get back to you, but it was in the first half of 2014.
You finished it about during the first half of 2014?
Yeah, to the best of my knowledge.
Yes. And then you submitted to the publishers? Or what?
I submitted it chapter by chapter by email.
Or as you were writing,
Yes.
you were
So
submitting
as soon as the chapter
it.
was completed, I would
Yes.
give it by email to the
Yes.
publisher.
Yes,
who then have
yes.
it.
And then the publisher wanted to investigate the story in the book, the contents of the book before publishing, is that right?
Yes, because I think there's a process that they follow. There's a
Yes.
legal vetting that happens, and
Yes.
this advice from the legal lawyers that is sought, and there were certain things
Yes.
that they wanted corroboration to, which we couldn't
Yes.
get because of the fact that most of the
Yes.
people were still working there. They were in
Yes.
employment.
And they felt that they had enough corroboration to be able to publish it when? They published it in 2018, but
March.
when did they, as far as you know, when did they feel that they had enough corroboration
I
to
think,
justify publishing?
to the best of my knowledge, it was about 2 or 3 months before that, because then if you look at the events that were unfolding at that time, especially
Yes.
some of the corroboration came from the Gupta leaks and the emails that were there. And then
Yes.
right around that time, most of the people who have been mentioned in this book are no longer working with AN7, and they are available to come in and independently verify some of the things that have been said in this book.
So do you,
Because if you had launched, one of the things was also about the safety of those people, because if this book comes out and, there are people who had moved to South Africa with their families and things, and knowing the way the Gupta family operated, we thought it was the right thing to do to just hold on to the manuscript till we could find a better corroboration to the facts that were put in the book.
I just thought that I'm not used to seeing that kind of note to the reader in a book. So I was wondering, is this something you are used to with other books yourself?
No, but I thought it was fair to tell the people this, because here, this is my version of the facts. This is something which the Gupta family would not agree with. This is something that President Zuma would not agree with. To bring that to the notice of the viewers is something that was very important, which the publisher said that we should do, and I agreed 100%. As a journalist, I believe all sides of the story should be told. This is my story. This is to the best of my knowledge and recollection, these are the facts that I know.
Yeah, but what I'm asking is a different question. Whether it's your own experience is that it's normal to have this kind of note to the reader in a book. Is that something that you are used to? I'm just saying, I don't remember having come across any book that has got this note.
I would say it's not normal, but there are, very unique circumstances in which this book was written and released over a period of time, over a period of years.
Because it's like the publisher doesn't have enough confidence in what is said in the book, and therefore feels that they must alert the reader to say, in case what is in the book here turns out to be not true, don't blame us.
No, see, of course, the publisher would be in a much better position to tell that, but
is that your own understanding of this note to the reader, or do you have a different understanding of this note?
No, see, my understanding of this note, and why I think it's important to put that out, is that this is a narration of events as per my, to the best of my knowledge, and this may be disputed by others. We have, the publisher has given them adequate notice to respond to the manuscript. They were given a reasonable period of time to respond. They have chosen not to respond. Even after the publishing of the book, it was published in March last year. It's already June now. They haven't responded. None of the people who were sent notices about this have responded. So clearly, if they had something to oppose here, if they had compelling evidence against what I've written, they would have done so.
Yes.
So that's my belief. I could be wrong, but...
Okay, no, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then maybe just on the book still, if you could just turn to page 160 of the book.
160.
160, Mr. Chairman,
Okay.
yes. There you deal with the reasons why you decided to resign, and you deal with how you crafted your letter of resignation. Could you just testify to that quickly as to how...
Okay. So this is after a few months of setting up the station, which had been extremely traumatic. It had taken a toll on my health. It had left me totally exhausted, and the final unkind blow was the actual launch. Like I said, I had, it stressed me a lot to think of the launch that would be, and it was my worst nightmare come true, the way the station launched. And I had decided to quit, like I said, weeks before I actually did. And when I wrote the resignation letter, I wanted to part on very good terms. Of course, I would probably never want to work with the Guptas again. I'd probably want never to be associated with Nazimova or Lakshmi Goyal for that matter. But I wrote a very polite letter thanking them and telling them that this was a good team that I worked with and all of that, because I wanted to part on very good terms with them. But I knew that I was leaving because I was totally fed up. I did not agree with the idea of the station. Like I said, I was also conned into coming in and setting up a station for what I believe was a mafia-like operation, for setting up a propaganda station which I did not want to in the first place. I had to stay there because of the reasons that I explained, because there were colleagues who would come in there with their families. I had decided to launch the station and go, but I did not want the parting of ways to be bitter in any way. I just wrote a resignation letter which was very polite, which thanked them, because I thought that was the right thing to do. And then, of course, I would then, once I left this organization, would have nothing to do with this ever again. That was my intention.
Yes. And then your letter would not have articulated any of the things that you've raised as evidence before the chairperson today?
No, because the resignation letter, when I wrote that, I just wanted it to be a final parting document, before I left. And I did not want to have any bitterness in there. I never thought that that is a document that would come to me after 6 years, before a commission. To me, I had joined a lot of organizations, left a lot of organizations. Some were extremely happy things. I was always going for a much better opportunity when I resigned from an organization. But here, for the first time in my life, I was resigning with no other opportunity or offer in my hand. Of course, I knew that when I went back to India, there will be many more opportunities that would present themselves, and I just had to pick and choose. But I was not satisfied with the way this came about. I was not happy at all with the fact that there was so much micromanagement that, as the professionals were not allowed to work. It ended up the way it did. But I did not want any of the bitterness to get into to my resignation letter. I wanted to write a polite letter and just move.
Yes, and I would imagine you also had to be careful, because in the event you wanted another job, you would have to mention this, that look, I launched AN7 in South Africa, and they might want to use it as a reference, isn't it? Would that have been one of the reasons that you...
That could have been one of the reasons, but I was very confident, although after the resignation I'd given, the last conversation that I was having with Mr. Lakshmi Goyal, he said that, when you get back to India, we'll make sure that you don't get another job and things like that. I was always confident that if I got back to India, I had enough of a reputation to find more assignments. But that could have also been a thought that went into my mind that, just part ways amicably. There's no point lobbing grenades and leaving. That was my idea at that time, Just part ways amicably, just give say the right things and move on. That was my idea.
Yes. And then you, in your epilogue, page 161.
Well, before the epilogue,
yes.
on that same page at 160,
yes.
where you talk about the reasons for your resignation. You say in the last sentence, I do sincerely hope ANN7 finds in its future editors the force that will break this mindset and unshackle the channel from the bonds that pin it down. What were you talking about there?
No, all the things the challenges that I faced, I thought, what I meant in this, that I really sincerely hoped and prayed that they found a South African editor at some point in the future who would help them break free from the legacy of the Guptas, the legacy that they brought of the corruption and all the dealings and the association with President Zuma and the cronyism and all of that, and would then be able to lead the editorial team into a new era which would be what good journalism should be about.
This is not what you said in the letter. This is what you say in the book.
Yeah, in the letter, see, I could have said a lot of things,
No,
but
I understand what you have said, but
yes.
When I read it, I thought you were recording what you said in the letter.
No.
So,
this is just a comment.
Do we have the letter of resignation somewhere?
Yes, in fact, it's in
Can you have a look?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It's in the papers that I mentioned just before we started after lunch.
Okay.
Could I just hand up? Thank you. Mr. Sundaram, you recall the bundle that I gave you during the lunch break?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. It should appear.
Ms. Norman?
Yes, Mr.
These pages are part of this other
No,
file
no,
or not?
no. This is the application I mentioned, Mr. Chairman.
That
from,
you mentioned.
From Mr. Mohsen.
Yes, okay,
yes,
all
yes.
right.
But he has attached the letter of resignation.
Yes.
It would be, the pages are not numbered, unfortunately. It would be page 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's actually page 6.
Yes, where it says subject of resignation.
Yes.
27 August 2013. Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you then just read out the letter, Mr. Sundaram?
Yes.
Is that in fact did you send that letter on the 27th of August at 8?
Yes, I did. As far as I recall, I think this is what I'd written. And
What
this is
you've
the
written?
letter.
Yes, could you please read it? Into the
Dear Lakshmiji and Ratulji, I have had the most exhilarating 3 months working with Infinity Media. It has been by far the best phase of my career. Working with the launch team and taking it from a shell to a wonderful world-class channel has been an honor and privilege. I have gained a lot from the wonderful management team, both as a journalist and as a manager. The passion and determination I've seen and learned here will remain with me throughout my life. However, at this point, I would like to part ways with Infinity Media and spend time with my ailing mother. While I would like to be relieved at the earliest, I assure you that I will stay with the project for as long as I'm needed. Please treat this communication as a resignation letter. I have the highest love, regard and respect for the two of you and leave with the satisfaction of having played my small role in launching a wonderful institution, and I'm sure will outlive me. Thank you for your love, support and help at every step of the way. I seek your blessings for my for my journey ahead. Rajesh Sundaram.
Thank you. So, a reader then of this letter would say, look, you really parted, you even sought blessings from them, so you were quite happy interacting with them over the 3 months period.
Well, I would disagree with that, because I wrote this letter because, I was filled with a lot of anger. Like I said, I decided to leave much earlier. But I've always known that, when you leave, when you part ways, there should not be any of that bitterness left in there.
No, Mr. Sundaram. Listen to the question.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you, Mr.
Ms. Norman is not talking about what you felt.
Mm-hmm. But
She's talking about what somebody reading this book, what impression they would get of how you felt. So that's what she is asking.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr.
Yeah.
Well, I agree.
So in other words, the question is, would you agree that a person reading this letter of resignation would have thought that you left, what's the word you used, but effectively
In
you were
good terms,
happy.
You were happy with them, and
Yeah,
you even
you
sought
were
their
happy with
blessing.
them.
Well, I would think that if they read my book and the circumstances in which these resignations came, they would understand
No,
what I'm
no,
talking about.
no.
But yeah,
Somebody who hasn't read your book but just reads the letter.
they would very easily tend to misunderstand. They would think that I was happy when I quit and all of that. But what puts this letter in context is the book. Is the book, because like I said, I'm not somebody who would take bitterness to my grave. Of course I had differences with them. Of course I'd never work with them again. But I just wanted, a severance of ways, a parting of ways, which was amicable, and just move on. So that next time I meet Lakshmi Goyal somewhere in Delhi, it wouldn't be like I'm avoiding his gaze or moving in the other direction, uncomfortable because we had these serious differences.
Yes.
So my intention in writing this letter was to write a very kind, polite letter, that's the kind of person I am, put that in their hand and go. And I think that's how it would have ended, unless they had their bodyguards chase after me, unless they had all the other events that happened between the time I gave my resignation and my exit from South Africa. So those things will have to be taken into context. But like I said, in terms of my relationship with Atul Gupta or Lakshmi Goyal, they had been decent in their conduct with me, in the way they spoke with me. They were respectful till the time I had resigned, till the time the things changed, when I saw their rude side, the side which was not polite. Because this was before I had those bitter experiences, before Lakshmi Goyal said that, you have a 2-year contract with us, you can't leave before that.
But Mr. Sundaram, please hold on. You have told me the conditions under which you were working there ahead of the launch, having few hours of sleep. You did say, of course, the salary was great, that you said. So you had that situation, and then you did say that you had effectively, you were not going to play any role in the editorial policy of the channel, because you were told that had already been decided. You formed a view quite soon, if I understood your evidence correctly, quite soon after you started working in South Africa, that this was not a place you wanted to be in for
Yes.
a long time.
Yes.
And that must be because you were unhappy with what you saw happening there.
Yes.
But your letter seems to suggest that you were very happy. So in the process of wanting to leave amicably, did you misrepresent what your true feelings were about this workplace?
I would say misrepresent, because the kind of person that I am, when I write a letter, even if there is a lot of bitterness, even if there's a lot of things that I didn't agree with, I would not let that reflect in a resignation letter. I would write that in a decent way. But having said that, yes, my feelings at that time are not reflected in the resignation letter. I was angry. I was conned into this project. I could have written all of those things and gotten into a fight with them, which I wanted to avoid. I was too tired by that time. My health, I had serious issues with my health, by which time I was basically tired, and I knew that this project had taken off, and it was a butt of a lot of jokes on social media because of the way the launch took place, and I just wanted an exit. Yeah, I agree with you that this resignation letter did not reflect my mood at that time. It did not reflect my anger. It did not reflect all the things that I wanted to say. But it was a conscious decision on my part that I wanted to write a letter which did not which did not have any bitterness in it, which thanked them for the opportunity they gave me, but which told them very firmly that this is where I want to part ways. This is a resignation letter, and I just want to move on.
Must I understand what you have just said to mean that you took a conscious decision that you should write a letter that did not correctly represent how you felt at the time?
Yes. Yes, that's true.
And there may have been different ways of writing the letter, and I just want your comment. One way would have been to ventilate your unhappiness and the reasons why you were unhappy. That would be one way. You didn't want that because you wanted the parting of ways to be amicable. Another way would have been to say, you know what, okay, I won't ventilate all the reasons why I'm unhappy, but at the same time, I'm not going to misrepresent how I feel, or I'm not going to praise these people after what I've experienced here. I will just say I've decided that it's time to move on, and I will be leaving, and that's it. And not say much, but this letter seems to me to heap praises on your employer.
Sure. See, I did not see any reason to give them reasons why I'm quitting. They knew about it because I raised each and every one of them, whether it was the laws that they were breaking, whether the violation of the labor laws, visa laws, whether it was about the compromise on editorial integrity that was happening. All of those issues I'd raised and had found no solution to those. So I did not think it was right on my part to bring those issues up because that's something that they knew already, and they had already made up my mind that they did not want to redress it in the way that I wanted it. So the only way for me was to go out, and at that time, the mental condition in which I was, I thought the best thing would be to write a polite mail, thank them, say that, you know, I had this is one of the best opportunities that I got, and just soft soap myself out of the situation, you know, without, because if I told them that these are the reasons why I'm quitting, then they'll say that probably I'm trying to angle for them to better the conditions so that I can continue to stay on. That was not my intention. I had decided to snap my ties with them, snap it for good. Of course, I had said here that till they find a successor, I was willing to continue because I did not want to leave them high and dry in the sense that, you know, just pack my bags and move overnight. I had given them that opportunity if they wanted, which I thought was the fair thing to do, you know, and the kind of person that I am, even today, if I were in a similar situation, I would do the same thing, which is to thank them, to politely say that I'd seek your blessings in my journey forward, and not, you know, I look forward, not look back to what had happened, because those things have already been done and dusted, and I was very clear that they did not want to improve on any of that or make conditions better that I stayed on, or things like that.
Yes.
I just had to.
As at that time, when you wrote the letter, were the 3 months that you had spent there, working there, the most exhilarating 3 months? And was that the best phase in your career, as at that time?
Well, I would answer that question in two ways. Was it exhilarating when it came to working with the Guptas and interacting with President Zuma and all the dirty tricks and all of that was happening? Absolutely not. But was it exhilarating working with a young team that I was working with? Absolutely it was. Was it exhilarating working with the passionate young people, the passion that they had for learning new techniques, the passion that they had you know, to work according to the highest standards of production and journalism? Absolutely. So to answer your question, it was exhilarating working with the team that was there, to interact with the young South Africans who I was working with. And I'm still very proud to say that I'm still friends with most of them. I continue to be in touch with them over social media.
Yes.
And in terms of I've set about 5 stations so far in my life. And when it comes to the people that I met here, the youngsters who we had hired, I have not found that caliber or that passion anywhere else that I've set up. So yes, but not in the sense that, so that I think was
in relation to your team.
Yes.
That was true only in relation to
because what they
team,
did was nothing short of a miracle in terms of, despite all the challenges, to set up a station that was fit enough to go on air. Of course, with whatever deficiencies that were there, but it's the very fact that 60 to 70% of the staff were the people who were, it was their first job, to be able to train them, to be able to use their passion to launch their station as soon as possible. Because if it were experienced people, they would have just said, it's not possible. You cannot launch a station at this short notice. But those were young people who put their, I remember some of them would come in early in the morning, 6, 7, and stay on till late in the night. And even then, there was one transport vehicle which was provided, which would go in the opposite direction and then come back, pick these people up, and they would spend 1 hour extra in office because the Gupta family couldn't find it in their pockets to put an extra vehicle to take the people simultaneously, but they would expect them to be in office at 6 in the morning, and most of them didn't do it grudgingly. All of them, as a matter of fact. I don't know anybody who worked that hard for those many hours with full dedication grudgingly. They did it with their passion. And like I said, I've never found such a young team which is passionate about their work like I've found in South Africa.
Thank you. You continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I didn't establish the time that the chairperson would want to adjourn today.
Well, if you wish to finish what you want to finish today, you can continue for some time.
Thank you.
I don't know what you have in mind. Otherwise, we can continue tomorrow. So there is still time if we want to wrap up.
Yes, maybe we should wrap up the issues relating to the letter as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as the chairperson has indicated to you, then in your letter you also leave a window that, look, in as much as I'm putting this to an end, but I'm still open to assist with the project. It's a wonderful project.
No, see, because as a professional, I think I cannot just pack my bags and go, especially when I'm leading the team.
Yes.
So what I meant by saying that was that, of course, they did not have a succession plan because it was very early in the project and it was all haphazard. So you decide on getting another person, and till that person comes in there, I'm ready to hold fort, But as of now, as of today, please treat this as my resignation letter. But I will continue for as long as it takes for you to find a new person who's suitable and who can replace me. But I was very clear that this is my resignation letter. That's it.
And then when you left on the 2nd of September, had they found a replacement?
No, because then by that time, the whole sequence of events had changed very quickly and they'd gotten very hostile, and they were trying to coerce me into staying first, and then they wanted me to sign a document. Like I said, for the first month that I worked, from the 1st of May 2013 to the 1st of June 2013, I still haven't been paid for that. The work that I did in India, I have not been paid for that till date. But I have not pressed for that. Initially at that time I said that I wanted, but they said, if you're leaving right now, if you're resigning right now, we won't give you whatever is due to you. I also, at that time, we were working long hours, we were working weekends, we were working public holidays, all of that. And I had a query that, am I entitled to any overtime on this? I was told that I was not, because I was in the management cadre, which I did not want to believe them. I don't know whether it's true or not, but I said that I would want to consult a lawyer to see if that is true. If that is true, I would leave that claim. But at least the 1 month, the very first month, I have not been paid. My salary started from the time I came to South Africa, and the salary was credited into the State Bank of India branch at Johannesburg. So I'm willing to give the records there as well. The salary was credited from the time I came to South Africa, but the 1 month that I spent in India, I have not been paid for that. And I'm not claiming that as well. I would not now say that I want that money. I've given that up. The larger issue here is, what happened after I resigned, and them thinking that they could intimidate the editor by sending bodyguards after them and chasing me, and all the events that happened that I've described in the book, where my hotel room was burgled. I've never been as scared as that in my entire life. And believe me, I've covered civil war, I've covered wars and riots, but those last few days and hours in South Africa were the most scary in my life. I actually thought that I would die, that I would not see my family again, and the kind of influence that they had. One day after I'd given the interviews, my hotel room was burgled. When I went to the police to file a complaint, they said that I told them that I'm leaving for India. They said that you can't file the complaint. It will have to be the hotel owner who does it. And the hotel owner filed a complaint at that time. Also, I couldn't go to the Indian High Commission because Virendra Gupta, who was the High Commissioner at that time, was a very close, had very close ties with the Gupta family. So I did not know how that would play out. So here I was all alone, thousands of miles away from my family, and I couldn't go to any of my colleagues because I would put them into trouble because they were there with their families and their children, and if I went and sought refuge at their home, they would be as much in trouble. So I was out there, and that's when I called my wife, and then she told me that, why don't you go to the media and tell them that your life is in danger? That way, when the whole world knows that if anything happens to you, it's because of the Guptas, they'll probably stay off. And then she booked me a ticket on South African Airways. And even till the time I was at the airport, when I cleared immigration, till I was in air, I was scared that, I would probably be brought back and,
Yes.
this would happen. So, of course, this happened after my resignation, and things got
Yes,
bad.
because I'm just thinking, because had you taken a different approach, I'm just trying to see what else could they have done to you. Because the media industry would have backed you up, because what you say in your book, if I may just refer you to that page 162 of your book, you say something there which I believe that the entire South African public would have supported you had you resigned and told them the things that you say in the book. If you could just read that paragraph, those few paragraphs on page 162.
I consider objectivity, this is 162, right?
Yes, yes.
Objectivity to be at the core of journalism. I was unwittingly drafted in to be part of a sinister plan to build, in my opinion, a propaganda television station. I quit because I did not want to be part of this. I quit because I did not want to compromise the values that had guided me for 20 years as a journalist. I wrote this book to invite constant public scrutiny of this channel. I hope this vigilance will force the channel to be objective in the content it produces.
Yes. So this then you formulated at the point when now relations between you have become hostile. But otherwise, had they allowed you, I would imagine, to just exit in the manner in which you wanted to exit, you would not have had to write the book. Am I correct?
To be very honest, probably not, because what I saw there was a total contempt, because regardless of me being Rajesh Sundaram, when I was before them in my last meeting where they set their bodyguards after me, I was the editor of a news station. So what I thought was that, those insults that were being heaped at me was not at Rajesh Sundaram, but at the office of an editor, at a journalist. That's what angered me, and that continued. It was not just the bodyguards chasing me out, but they were constantly trying to play mind games with me. They were constantly, there was an attempt to burgle my hotel room. So that's what really, made me think at that time that it's not because they insulted me or because they chased me out or any of that, but because of the kind of mindset that thinks journalism or an editor is somebody that you can have your bodyguards chase and have their house burgled and intimidate. So I wrote this book because, that's when I decided that this should come out in front of the South African public. All these details should be known by them as well. It's not just okay for me to not be happy with the situation, not be happy with all the compromises that were happening and just quit and move out. But it was also important for me to tell that story so that a larger audience knows about this. And like I said, there is, if we know that ANN7 was made, this is the background to which, the channel came into existence. There was to be a constant public vigilance that, for any content that they put out, there should be constant scrutiny to ensure that they did not violate any of the things that I've written about in this book. Because the people of South Africa need to know the circumstances and the reasons why the station was set up.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, maybe to just close off the resignation issue, because there's a letter that is attached to the bundle, Exhibit CC1, A and B. I'm sure you're familiar with that letter, Mr. Sundaram. If you could just turn to page 29, that is a letter from the lawyers of Infinity Media.
29?
Page 29. Have you found it?
Yes.
Thank you. In paragraph 2 of that letter, they actually quoting from your letter of resignation. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then they were saying that now you were the cause of whatever hiccups were there at AN7, and they intended to serve you with documents, supposing maybe summons, to claim damages from you.
Well, I responded to this notice that I got through an email, and I told them that I would go ahead. They were basically trying to tell me not to talk to the media or to interact with the public in any way. And I wrote back in an email, and I told them that I will continue to do that. Please go ahead, take whatever legal action you have to take against me. And I would come to South Africa to defend myself, because I am convinced about the interviews that I'm giving the media are based on facts that I know, and I stand by them. So this letter came to me in 2013. It's 2019 now. I haven't heard back from the lawyers. So that's the background to this. Of course, I've explained. They were, I wrote this there. I do agree that I did write this, and like I said, there were two aspects to the setting up the station. Yes. Was working with a wonderful team, and also with the dubious management team which was there, which was not the best 3 months of my life, but working with a passionate team in setting up and doing the impossible. Setting up a station in 3 months is something which is unheard of, and which was done here. And that was not because of me. It was definitely not because of the Guptas or Nazim Hoa. It was because of the passion and the hard work and the long hours, the sweat, blood, and toil of the staff who had come in here, most of whom, for whom it was the first job, and most of whom gave everything that they had to launch the station. And I don't think they've received a single word of thank you from anybody. So, of course, at this time, I would want to place on record the hard work that they put in there to launch the station.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We will be moving on to new areas tomorrow.
Yes, that's fine. Before we adjourn,
yes.
Is my understanding correct that during the time when you were working for the station, or let me put it this way, at some stage you seemed to say you had raised your issues with the Gupta brothers. Is that correct?
Yes.
The things that you were unhappy about?
Yes.
And what had been their response?
I remember, like, for instance, the abuse of staff. There was this one time when he actually physically assaulted one of the employees, and I took him to a side and I told him that this is not acceptable. You're undermining the authority of the managers here if you go and do this. If you have any issues, let us do it in a way things should be done in the office. One is that he did not have any understanding of broadcast. For instance, if there was a bug in the system and the teleprompter failed, he thought that it was sabotage, that somebody was trying to sabotage his news bulletins. Or if there is, the playout system suddenly had a glitch, he would think it's the guy who's sitting and doing the playout was was being paid by his rivals to do that, and go and abuse them, call them things like monkeys and things like that. So I would take him to the side and say, you can't do that, because you don't understand what is happening here. So then he would say, oh, I know I shouldn't be doing that, but I'm diabetic, so sometimes when I have low sugar or high sugar, these things happen, I'm sorry about it. And the next day, the same thing would happen, He'd go out there and scream at somebody, or also things like, he would perch himself on the mezzanine floor, and he'd keep looking at what's happening, who's doing what work, without knowing. For instance, there was a person who was on the output desk would be constantly making rundowns for the bulletin, half hour after the half hour, hour after the hour, and he was glued to his chair because that's what he was supposed to be doing. And that's a very stressful job. And he'd be sitting from there not knowing what it was, and he'd call me and say, what is that guy doing there? I said, he's making the rundown, and he's the guy who's the output head, and he's got to make sure that all the stories are factually correct, the sequential order is okay, and it has all the elements like the tags and all of that is there. So I said, how do I know that he's working and not watching a porn site? Because he's not moved from the chair. So, as a professional, you don't know what to say to something like that, because it was somebody who had no understanding of what was happening, but, wanting to interfere and micromanage, and
yes.
Making sure that he prevailed.
And about your views about the involvement of Mr. Zuma, did you articulate your concerns about the role he was playing?
No, I did ask a few questions to Nazim Hua and people who were part of the marketing team. I would want to name the person because that could get him into trouble, but it was a well-established fact that was the ownership pattern.
Yes.
As a journalist, I know that if that is a decision I should have taken before I joined. If I had known that there was a conflict of interest, I would not have. But after I come in as a journalist, join as an editor, it's not my business to say that change the editorial pattern now. It was for me to quit, which is what I did.
Yeah, so. Okay. And then in your book, I was looking for this in your statement, and it looks like I saw it in your book at page 85. Somewhere in the middle, you write, a tool, this is in the context of the breakfast meetings and SABC and the New Age. I see here you write, a tool boasted to me once that he could get any national or provincial minister he wanted for the show. You see that?
Yes.
Do you confirm whether that is indeed what Mr. Atul Gupta said to you?
Yes.
Yes. It's that part of what you say is quite interesting also, because Mr. Themba Masego, I mentioned Mr. Themba Masego earlier to you. Mr. Themba Masego, if I recall his evidence correctly, testified before me last year, and if I remember correctly, also said something to more or less the same effect as something that was said by Mr. Ajay Gupta to him, that if there was any minister who was not cooperating, and this was in the context of, according to Mr. Masego, Mr. Ajay Gupta wanting Mr. Masego as Director General of GCIS to, in inverted commas, I would say, cooperate with regard to the Gupta brothers or their businesses getting a certain share of the advertising revenue. And Mr. Masego, if I recall his evidence, said that Mr. Ajay Gupta said that if there was any minister who was not cooperating, he should tell him, in effect, which one. And I can't remember the words that he used, but whatever words he used, according to Mr. Masego, conveyed the impression to me that Mr. Ajay Gupta was saying that they would report him to former President Zuma, or they would see what to do with a minister who was not cooperating. So here you have
Yes, because
You have-
also in my interaction, like I said...
hang on,
you
Mr.
know,
Sundaram, hang on. You have in your book a statement which seems very similar, which seems to resonate with what Mr. Masego said, namely that but now this was Mr. Atul Gupta, not Mr. Ajay Gupta, saying to you, for those breakfast shows or briefings, he could get any national minister or provincial minister that he wanted to the show.
Yes. Also, I was told that these meetings were insanely profitable. That's the word that Nazim Oba would use, because it was not just that the minister came there. It was, they would sell the tables around it. The cost for the broadcast was, of course, with the SABC, and the ministers would come, and sometimes the ministers would also be arm twisted into paying for the venue and the meal that was served as well. So clearly, it was pure gravy for the Guptas or the New Age, because they did not have to spend for the broadcast, they didn't have to spend for the venue in some cases, and whatever tables were sold at those meetings was a pure profit that went into this thing. Like I still remember there was one time when there was one of these meetings that was scheduled in Cape Town, and I was asked to go with them to Cape Town for that meeting, and they actually flew in a private jet. So I just asked Nazim about this, do you actually make enough money to fly down? Why didn't you fly commercial? Because wouldn't that make more business sense? So he said, no, this is insanely profitable. We're going to Cape Town. I don't now remember the minister who was there, but the ministry had paid for the venue. They had even got the stakeholders to buy tickets and come and see this, to be seated there. So all of that was happening. So it was, like I said, in most cases, it was pure gravy for the Gupta brothers. They were not doing anything. They were just, and it was, most people would come and buy the chairs there, because that was an opportunity to network with the minister and the high bureaucrats who came with them. And that was what was being sold, and and it was broadcast on SABC. So that was another selling point for the Guptas there. So this is something that they openly admitted. And whenever there were problems that the marketing team had in getting any of the ministers, that would be reported in the executive committee meeting. And then Atul Gupta would make a note of it. And it was taken up during these meetings with President Zuma.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll adjourn at this stage, and then we'll start at 10 o'clock tomorrow.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Is there another witness that...
There is.
There is.
Yes, there is.
Okay,
Yes. Thank you.
We'll adjourn at this stage, and tomorrow we'll start at 10 o'clock. We
Thank you.
adjourn.
Thank you.
All right.